My name is Helen Crawford, and I'm 64 years old. On the day I buried my husband Daniel, the sky over Charleston was as heavy as my heart, gray clouds pressing down, rain sliding off black umbrellas, the earth swallowing the man I had loved for 42 years. My hands trembled as I clutched the roses on his coffin, and then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I'm alive. That's not me in the casket. Don't trust our sons. In that moment, the world around me shattered. The mournful prayers, the sound of dirt hitting the wood, all of it faded into a ringing silence. I stared at Michael and Ethan, my two boys, standing just a few feet away, their faces calm, their tears strangely forced. My breath caught in my throat. If Daniel was truly alive, then who had we just buried? And why were my sons looking at me with such cold, rehearsed sorrow? Asterisk, asterisk, if you've ever felt dismissed, betrayed, or made to feel invisible, or maybe you've experienced the deepest loneliness, or that unbearable pain of losing those you love, most share it. Leave a comment, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe, because maybe the next story will remind you of your own strength. Asterisk, asterisk, the cemetery was almost empty. A thin veil of mist clung to the old gravestones, and the pastor's voice droned on like a distant echo. I couldn't focus on his words. All I could hear was the pounding of my heart and the faint vibration of that single message, still burning on my phone screen. I'm alive. That's not me in the casket. Don't trust our sons. I pressed the phone against my chest, hiding it under the folds of my black dress. My mind screamed, this can't be real. Daniel is dead. I saw him in that hospital bed. Or did I? The coffin lowered inch by inch, and with every scrape of the ropes, I felt my soul being dragged down with it. I forced myself to glance at my sons. Michael stood tall in his dark suit, his eyes flicking toward his watch more than toward the casket. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his hand squeezing the shoulder of his fiancée Vanessa, who, God help me, was scrolling her phone under her black veil. Their grief looked staged, as if they were playing roles in a drama they didn't believe in. Mama Yora, Michael whispered suddenly, his voice carrying a strange mix of concern and calculation. I nodded quickly, stuffing the phone into my purse before he could glimpse the screen. I just need a moment, I lied, though my entire body was trembling. I wanted to scream, to demand answers right there in front of Daniel's grave, but I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. If that message was real, if Daniel was alive somewhere, then my sons, the very flesh of my flesh, were part of something darker than I dared imagine. The pastor closed his Bible, the final prayer hanging in the damp air. Dirt struck the coffin with a hollow thud. My neighbor Doris held my arm as my knees threatened to give out, but even her gentle touch felt far away, like I was moving through a fog. My phone buzzed again. This time I didn't even look until we were walking back to the car. The words on the screen froze my blood. They're watching you. Don't eat or drink anything they offer. Tonight, check Daniel's desk at the shop. You'll find the truth. I gasped so sharply Doris turned to me. Helen, what is it? I shook my head, forcing a smile I didn't feel. Nothing. Nothing at all. But inside, I knew. My husband's death wasn't an accident, and my nightmare was only beginning. Asterisk, asterisk, long before the shadows fell over my family, there were sunlit days I thought would never end. I was only 22 when I first saw Daniel Crawford outside his father's auto shop on Meeting Street in Charleston. The summer heat shimmered off the asphalt, and he stood there with grease on his hands and the shyest smile I'd ever seen. Good morning, Helen, he said, almost too softly, as if afraid his voice might scare me away. I laughed nervously, tugging at the hem of my faded blue dress. Morning, Daniel. Do you fix bicycles too, or just cars? He wiped his hands on a rag, his hazel eyes catching the sunlight. I can fix anything with wheels, even yours, if you'd let me. The truth was, I didn't own a bicycle, but the way he looked at me made my heart stumble. So I lied. Well, mine's been squeaking lately. Maybe I'll bring it by. From that tiny white lie blossomed a love truer than anything money could buy. We started meeting under the live oak in White Point Garden, where Spanish moss hung like curtains from the branches. I can still feel the rough bark against my back, the way the golden dusk painted his face when he whispered promises of forever. Our wedding was simple homemade cake, borrowed church, second-hand dress, but when Daniel slid that plain silver ring onto my finger, I felt like the richest woman alive. Those first years were hard. We lived in a two-bedroom house with a tin roof that sang in every rainstorm. Pots lined the floors to catch the leaks, and sometimes I sewed late into the night just to keep up with the bills. But every hardship felt lighter with Daniel's laughter filling the room. He'd sit at the table, covered in engine oil, and grin at me like I was the most beautiful woman in the world. When our first son, Michael, was born, I thought my chest might burst from joy. 2 years later, Ethan followed, and my world felt complete. Daniel taught them how to fish by the Ashley River, how to hammer nails straight, how to tell stories that made their little eyes go wide with wonder. Back then, I believed we had built something unshakable. Love, work, sacrificed it, all seemed enough to bind us forever. But as I stand now, in the ruins of that perfect memory, I realize how wrong I was. Love can weather poverty and hardship, but it can be no match for greed. And somewhere deep down, a voice inside me whispered, "Boys you raised in love may one day betray you in ways you cannot imagine." Time moved quickly in those years. One day I was wiping mashed potatoes off little cheeks, and the next, I was watching Michael and Ethan put on their pressed shirts for high school. Taller than me, with voices deeper than their father's, I thought love alone could hold them close. I didn't see the distance growing until it was too late. Michael, my firstborn, was always ambitious. From the time he was 12, he asked questions that stung more than he realized. Why don't we have a car like the Jenkins family? Why don't we live in a bigger house? His tone wasn't innocent curiosity anymore. It carried shame. Daniel would put down his tools, his hands still blackened with grease, and say, "Son, what we lack in things, we make up for in heart. You'll understand one day." But Michael only rolled his eyes. Ethan followed every step his brother took. Where Michael questioned, Ethan echoed. Where Michael complained, Ethan agreed. He was softer, yes, but his loyalty to his brother outweighed the bond with his parents. I remember one evening on the porch, the cicadas hummed in the summer air, and Daniel offered Michael a chance to apprentice at the shop. "You've got strong hands," he said proudly. "You could run this place one day. It could be yours." Michael's jaw tightened. He didn't look at his father when he answered, "I don't want to spend my life smelling like oil and sweat. I'm going to be someone important." The words cut deeper than any blade. I saw Daniel's face crumble, though he tried to hide it with a forced smile. That night, long after the boys had gone to bed, he sat on the porch alone, staring at the stars. His shoulders slumped in a way I'd never seen before. I wanted to comfort him, but my own heart was breaking. As the years passed, the gap widened. Michael won a scholarship, moved to the city, and quickly climbed into real estate. Ethan followed, not long after, taking a job in finance. Their visits became shorter, their phone calls briefer. When they did come home, it was in expensive cars, with clothes sharp enough to cut, their voices filled with talk of deals and investments. They looked around our modest home with eyes that didn't see love, only peeling paint and old furniture. One day Michael leaned across the kitchen table and said, "Mom, Dad, you should move. This house is falling apart. You deserve better." Better. He didn't mean better for us. He meant better for him, something polished, something that didn't embarrass him. And for the first time, I felt it, the cold distance of children ashamed of where they came from. I'll never forget the first evening Vanessa walked into our home. The air outside was heavy with summer heat, crickets singing in the grass. But when she stepped onto our old wooden porch, a chill followed her in. Her heels sank awkwardly into the dirt path as though the earth itself rejected her presence. She wore a crimson dress that clung like fire against the dimming twilight, a diamond necklace glinting at her throat. I had never seen fabric that fine up close before. "Nice to meet you," she said, her voice flat, a smile stretched too tight. She reached out, but only the tips of her fingers grazed mine, cold as glass. Her eyes scanned the living room as she entered every worn cushion, every crack in the plaster, as if cataloging evidence in a case against us. I had spent the whole day cooking meatloaf, collard greens, cornbread, the dishes Daniel loved, the ones I thought might remind Michael of home. When we sat down at the table, Vanessa barely touched her plate. She cut the food into neat little squares but never lifted her fork. Michael leaned toward her, whispering, though his voice carried just enough for me to hear, "Next time, we'll take them to a restaurant, something nicer." My hand froze on my glass. I had cooked with all the love a mother could pour into a meal, and still, it wasn't enough. My son was embarrassed of me, of our home, of his father's simple pride. Daniel's eyes flickered with quiet fury, though he said nothing. Instead, he bowed his head over his plate, his fork scraping slowly against the china. Vanessa broke the silence. "You should think about selling this place," she said lightly, as if it were casual. "There are lovely retirement communities in Mount Pleasant. Safer, easier. You'd be more comfortable." The word comfortable landed like a stone in my chest. 40 years of memories, birthdays, Christmas mornings, nights patching the roof in the rain, and she dismissed it all in a single sentence. I forced a smile. "We're comfortable here, thank you." My voice trembled despite my effort. Michael squeezed Vanessa's hand under the table, his eyes apologetic but his choice clear. He was with her, not us. Night. After they left in their sleek black car, Daniel sat on the porch, his hands gripping the railing. "Money has changed our boy," he whispered, staring into the dark. "And that woman, she doesn't see us as family, only as obstacles." I didn't want to believe him. But deep down, in the part of me I couldn't silence, I already knew. He was right. It started subtly, in passing comments during their rare visits. "You know, Mom, Dad," Michael said one Sunday afternoon, swirling his wineglass as though he were in some high-rise penthouse instead of our modest kitchen, "this house is really starting to fall apart." Ethan nodded eagerly, his tie still tight from a business meeting. "Yeah, you should think about selling before it loses all value. The market's hot now." I looked around our little home. The wallpaper was faded, the floor creaked under every step, but it was ours. Every corner carried a memory, the marks on the doorframe where I measured their heights as children, the burn on the countertop from Daniel's first attempt at making pancakes. Daniel's jaw tightened. "This house isn't just numbers on a page, it's our life." Michael set down his glass with a sharp clink. "Dad, don't be stubborn. You're 70. You can't keep working in that shop forever. What if you get hurt? What then?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. "Working isn't a burden. It gives me purpose. You think I want to sit around waiting to die?" The air grew heavy. Vanessa smoothed her dress, her lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "There are beautiful retirement communities in Mount Pleasant. Pools, nurses, organized activities. You'd be taken care of." The phrase felt like a blade against my skin. Taken care of. As though we were children again, incapable of deciding our own lives. I forced myself to speak, though my throat burned. "We don't need caretakers. We have each other." Ethan sighed dramatically, pulling out a stack of papers from his briefcase. "Just look at this appraisal. The house is worth maybe $1,000 at best. If you sell now, Michael can add money, and you could move somewhere modern, safer, a better place." Daniel's hands trembled, but his voice was steel. "There is no better place than the home where I raised my boys." Michael's smile tightened into a grim line. "Dad, you're living in the past. It's time to be practical." Something shifted in the room, cold and final. I looked into my son's eyes and saw not love, not concern, but impatience. To them, we weren't parents anymore. We were obstacles, assets to be liquidated. That night, after they left, Daniel sat silently on the porch, the cicadas buzzing like restless thoughts. "Something's wrong, Helen," he whispered. "This isn't just ambition. They want something from us, something more." His words lingered in the humid air, and for the first time, I felt a chill I couldn't explain. It was a Tuesday morning when the call came. I was in the kitchen, rolling out biscuit dough, when the phone rang with a sharpness that sliced through the quiet. "Mrs. Crawford," a stern voice said, "this is Memorial Hospital. Your husband has been in an accident. You need to come immediately." The words blurred together. Accident, explosion, critical condition. My hands went cold, flour dust falling like snow onto the floor. I couldn't breathe. Doris, my neighbor, had to drive me because my legs shook so badly I couldn't press the pedals. The 15-minute ride felt like hours. My mind screamed, "Not Daniel. Please God, not Daniel." When we arrived, Michael and Ethan were already there, standing in the waiting room in crisp suits. My stomach twisted. How did they get here before me? Who told them? "Mom," Michael said, rushing forward, pulling me into a hug that felt rehearsed. "Dad's in bad shape. The doctors said one of the machines in the shop exploded." Ethan added quickly, "Severe burns, brain trauma. They don't know if he'll make it." I stumbled into the ICU, heart pounding. The room smelled of disinfectant and melted plastic. Machines beeped in mechanical rhythm. And there he was, my Daniel, covered in bandages, tubes snaking from his arms, his chest rising and falling only because of the ventilator. Daniel, I whispered, clutching the only part of him left untouched, his hand. I'm here. You're going to be okay. For a moment, I felt the faintest squeeze. His eyelids fluttered. A spark of life. My warrior was still fighting. But when I turned, the boys weren't watching their father. Michael was on the phone, murmuring, "Yes, the insurance should cover it. Beneficiaries are already in place." Ethan leaned toward a nurse, asking about medical bills, deductibles, policies. Rage bubbled in my chest. "Your father is still alive," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "Stop talking about money." They froze, exchanging a quick glance. Michael plastered on a calm smile. "Of course, Mom. We're just trying to prepare. For you. Prepare." The word chilled me. For the next 3 days, I lived in that hospital, sleeping on the hard plastic chairs, praying for a miracle. Daniel's condition wavered between fragile hope and devastating despair. The doctors grew colder in their prognosis. And through it all, my sons lingered at my side, not holding my hand, not grieving with me, but watching, waiting. On the third night, as the machines beeped steadily, I leaned close to Daniel and whispered, "If you can hear me, tell me what I don't know. Tell me the truth." And his lips moved, barely. But I swear he was trying to speak. Asterisk, asterisk. The third night after Daniel's accident, I dozed off in the hospital chair, my head resting against the cold wall. The beep of machines was the only lullaby. Then buzz. My phone vibrated against my thigh. Groggy, I pulled it out, expecting a message from Doris checking in, but the sender was unknown. Check the insurance. It was their idea. My heart lurched. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the phone. I glanced around the waiting room. Michael was pacing near the vending machine, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and clipped. Ethan scrolled through emails, his brow furrowed, though not in grief. Neither looked at me. I slipped the phone back into my purse, as if hiding a weapon. Their idea. Whose idea? What insurance? The next morning, after another sleepless night, I returned home to shower and change. The house felt empty. Daniel's boots still by the door, his coffee mug unwashed on the counter. I couldn't bear to touch them. Buzz. Another message. Look at the policy. 6 months ago, he didn't want it. They pressured him. I froze, staring at Daniel's old wooden desk in the corner of the living room. My fingers trembled as I unlocked the metal box where he kept important papers, bills, bank slips, the deed to the house, and then an insurance policy. My eyes widened. The coverage had been increased from $5,000 to $50,000 just 6 months earlier. My knees buckled, and I sat hard in the chair. Daniel never mentioned this to me. And Daniel never hid anything. I dug deeper. There was another policy, workers' compensation, purchased only 2 months ago. A clause for accidental death on the job. $15,000. Enough to tempt anyone desperate. Boz, they convinced him it was to protect you. He felt uneasy. Check his handwriting. I stared at the signature. It was Daniel's, but shakier, less steady than usual. I knew his hand like I knew my own breath. He had been pressured. He hadn't trusted it. A cold wave rushed through me. My sons, my boys, had they pushed their father into signing these? The memory of their whispered conversations about beneficiaries and deductibles flashed in my mind. Suddenly, it all fit together like broken glass. Sharp and cruel. I pressed the papers to my chest, my tears staining the ink. No, not my sons, not them. But deep inside, I already knew. And when my phone buzzed again, the words carved a hole straight through my soul. Don't trust Michael and Ethan. They are not who you think they are. Asterisk, asterisk. The next morning, I couldn't sit still. The walls of my house pressed in on me, every creak of the floorboards echoing like a warning. The messages wouldn't leave my mind. Insurance policies, pressure, signatures that didn't look quite right. So I went to the one place Daniel trusted for decades. First Southern Bank on King Street. Mrs. Thompson, the branch manager, had known us since our boys were in grade school. She gave me a sad smile as I walked in. "Helen, I'm so sorry about Daniel," she whispered, guiding me into her office. "Thank you," I said, my throat tight, "but I need to see our accounts. I think something isn't right." She pulled the statements for the last 6 months. My breath caught. Thousands of dollars withdrawn, $1,000 in January, $3,000 in February, $4,000 in March. Daniel never mentioned this. And I handled the household accounts. Who authorized these withdrawals? I asked, my voice trembling. Mrs. Thompson slid over the receipts. Your husband signed them himself. I leaned closer. At first glance, it looked like Daniel's signature, but the loops of his D were jagged, the line of his C too shaky. Daniel's hand was steady even at 70. He could still sketch mechanical parts with perfect precision. Buzz, my phone lit up in my purse. I excused myself to the hallway, my heart hammering. Compare the signatures. He wasn't alone. I stormed back into the office. Mrs. Thompson, did anyone come with him when he made these withdrawals? She hesitated, then nodded. Yes, I remember Michael being here once, maybe twice. He said he was helping his dad with the paperwork because Daniel forgot his glasses. The room tilted. Daniel never forgot his glasses. He wore them even while sleeping sometimes. My fingers tightened on the desk. Are you sure? Mrs. Thompson gave me a puzzled look. Paucity seemed so proud, said Michael was helping with the shop finances. I thanked her and left, clutching the receipts like they were burning my hands. Outside, the Charleston sun was too bright, too harsh. My tears blurred the world into watercolor streaks. Michael, my firstborn. He had stood beside his father in that bank. He had guided his pen. He had lied. As I sat in my car, another message appeared on my phone. The withdrawals were only the beginning. The insurance was their trap. Daniel suspected it. Look in his desk at the shop. You'll find his notes. My hands shook on the steering wheel. For the first time in my life, I feared my own children. The next afternoon, when Michael and Ethan were busy at work, I drove to Daniel's shop. My hands clutched the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The shop had always smelled of oil and sawdust, a place of warmth and memory. But that day, it felt like walking into a tomb. I paused at the doorway. The shop was spotless, no scorch marks, no twisted metal, no sign of an explosion, just the familiar hum of silence. My chest tightened. How could there have been a blast if everything looked untouched? The old oak desk sat in the corner, worn smooth by decades of Daniel's hands. I approached it as if it might vanish if I moved too fast. My fingers brushed the drawer handle. It stuck at first, but with a tug, it opened. Inside, beneath wrenches and yellowed receipts, lay a notebook. Daniel's handwriting filled the pages, firm, precise, except where the lines trembled near the end. Charles insists I need more insurance, says it's for Helen, but something feels wrong. I don't trust his intentions. The words punched the air from my lungs. I read on, my tears blurring the ink. Ethan brought papers for me to sign, said it was to modernize the shop. He rushed me. I didn't understand everything. Why so urgent? I pressed my hand over my mouth. He had known. My Daniel had sensed the danger creeping into our home. Then I saw an envelope tucked in the back of the drawer, my name written on it in his steady hand. Helen. My fingers shook as I tore it open. My dearest Helen, if you are reading this, it means something has happened to me. I fear Michael and Ethan have changed. They speak of money, insurance, selling the house. Jasmine pushes them, but their choices are their own. Yesterday Michael told me I should think about my safety. His words felt like a threat. If I don't survive, don't trust blindly. Protect yourself. I love you beyond death. The letter fell from my hands. I sank into Daniel's chair, sobs tearing out of me. The walls closed in, and for the first time, I admitted the unthinkable. My sons, the boys I had nursed and sung to sleep, had become my enemies. Buzz. My phone lit up on the desk. You have the proof now, but they won't stop with him. Be careful, they're already planning what to do with you. I stared at the glowing screen. Daniel's letter still clutched in my other hand. The truth was undeniable. The people I loved most were the ones plotting my destruction. The knock came just after sunset. The last glow of daylight still lingered on the horizon, painting the windows in streaks of orange and shadow. My stomach tightened. I hadn't invited anyone. When I opened the door, there they were, Michael, Ethan, and Vanessa, smiling too brightly, carrying a white bakery bag and a thermos of coffee. Mom, Michael said warmly, almost rehearsed, we were worried about you. You've been under so much stress. Vanessa stepped forward, her perfume sharp, intrusive. We brought your favorite pastries, blueberry scones from King Street Bakery, and coffee, fresh, just how you like it. I forced a smile, my nails digging into my palms. The mysterious message from earlier echoed in my mind. Don't eat or drink anything they offer. Thank you, I said softly, stepping aside. Come in. They settled around the kitchen table, the same table where I had once served them birthday cakes, where Daniel had told bedtime stories. Now it felt like a stage set for betrayal. Ethan slid the bag toward me. Go on, Mom. You've lost weight. You need to eat. I shook my head gently. I already had dinner. Michael poured steaming coffee into a mug, sliding it across the table. Just a sip. Then, it'll help you sleep. You look exhausted. The smell wafted upward, bitter and unfamiliar. My heart pounded. I curled my fingers around the mug, but didn't lift it. You're right, I am tired. I set it back down, untouched. Vanessa's smile thinned. You need strength, Helen. We can't take care of you if you won't take care of yourself. I met her eyes. Steady. I've been taking care of myself and this family for more than 40 years. For a flicker of a second, Michael's mask slipped. Impatience flashed in his gaze, quickly replaced by feigned concern. Mom, he said, lowering his voice, you've been acting strange. The neighbors say you're paranoid. You went to the police station asking questions about Dad. This isn't healthy. Ethan leaned forward, tone sharper. We think it's grief, but it could get worse if you don't accept help. The word help dripped with menace. My pulse thundered in my ears. I clasped my hands together tightly to keep them from shaking. What kind of help? Michael's smile returned, smooth as polished glass. A place with doctors, nurses, a care home, somewhere safe. My breath caught. There it was. Their plan laid bare. The coffee sat untouched between us, steam curling upward like a silent threat, and I realized in that moment this wasn't a visit of comfort. This was a test. If I had taken one sip, one bite, it might have been my last. Asterisk, asterisk, that night, long after Michael, Ethan, and Vanessa left my house with their untouched pastries and poisoned smiles, I sat in the kitchen trembling. Daniel's letter lay open beside me, the warning clear. Don't trust them. My phone buzzed again. It's time. Meet me at the corner cafe at noon tomorrow. I have evidence. Thomas Reed, private investigator. The next day I walked into the cafe, my heart pounding. The smell of roasted coffee beans should have been comforting, but every clink of a spoon against porcelain made me flinch. At a back table sat a tall man in a gray coat, a folder tucked under his arm. Double quotes, Mrs. Crawford. He asked quietly as I sat. His eyes were sharp, but kind. Daniel hired me weeks ago. He was afraid of them. I gripped the edge of the table. Tell me what you found. Thomas opened the folder. Inside were photographs, receipts, audio recordings. My blood ran cold as he pressed play on a recorder. Michael's voice, unmistakable. No, we can't wait. Dad's getting suspicious. Once he's gone, Mom will fold easily. She's too fragile to fight. Then Ethan's voice. We'll make it look like an accident. By the time anyone questions it, the insurance will already be ours. My vision, blurred, but this time not from grief, from rage. My sons had killed their father. And now they wanted me gone. Thomas leaned closer. We have enough to take to the police. But they're moving quickly. They've already scheduled a meeting with a judge to have you declared incompetent. If they succeed, it'll be harder to stop them. I straightened in my chair, my voice steadier than I felt. Then we act tonight. That evening, under cover of dusk, Thomas and I walked into the police station. Sergeant O'Connell, a man who had known Daniel since high school, listened as we laid everything on his desk. The insurance documents, the forged signatures, the withdrawals, the recordings. When Michael's cold voice filled the small office, plotting his father's death, the sergeant's jaw tightened. This is monstrous, he muttered. We'll move before dawn. Warrants will be ready. They won't see it coming. For the first time since Daniel's accident, I felt a flicker of hope that as I left the station, the humid Charleston night wrapped around me like a shroud. Tomorrow, my sons would finally face justice, and this time, I wouldn't tremble. I would stand. For Daniel, for the truth, for myself. Asterisk, dawn came heavy and gray, a storm brewing over Charleston. I sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of untouched tea, when the sound of sirens pierced the silence. My chest tightened as police cars swept down the street. Through the lace curtains, I watched officers storm Michael's condo. Across town, while another team headed for Ethan's apartment. Within an hour, Both my sons were in handcuffs, their suits rumpled, their faces pale. That when Sergeant O'Connell knocked on my door later that morning, his expression was firm but respectful. "Mrs. Crawford, it's done. They're in custody charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder." My knees nearly gave way. Relief mingled with heartbreak. They were my sons, my blood, and yet they had become strangers willing to poison their own father for money. The trial began 2 months later. The courthouse packed with neighbors, reporters, even strangers who had followed the story in the news. I wore Daniel's favorite navy dress, the one he said brought out my eyes, and clutched his wedding ring on a chain around my neck. The prosecutor laid everything bare. The forged withdrawals, the falsified insurance policies, the recordings where Michael and Ethan coldly plotted Daniel's death, and worse, my own. When the audio played, I closed my eyes, tears rolling down my cheeks. Michael's voice was steady, calculating. "Once Dad's gone, Mom won't last long. We can make it look like grief took her." Ethan agreed without hesitation. The courtroom gasped. Some shook their heads, others cried openly. My neighbor Doris clutched my hand. On the stand, I told the jury the truth. I raised them with love. Daniel gave them everything he had, but love cannot survive in hearts consumed by greed. They killed their father, and they tried to kill me. They are no longer my sons, they are criminals. Silence filled the room. For the first time, Michael dropped his gaze. Ethan's jaw trembled, but it was too late. After 6 long hours, the jury returned. "We find the defendants guilty." The judge's voice rang out. "Michael Crawford and Ethan Crawford, for the murder of your father and conspiracy to murder your mother, you are sentenced to life in prison without parole." The gavel struck, and with it, a weight lifted from my chest. Justice had spoken. Months later, I transformed Daniel's old shop into a garden filled with roses, sunflowers, and carnations bright, living proof that beauty can grow from ruin. I also founded the Daniel Crawford Foundation to help families betrayed by those they trusted most. Sometimes, when I sit on the porch with Doris or sip coffee with Thomas Reed, the investigator who became my friend, I feel Daniel's presence in the warm breeze. To anyone listening, I say this: family is not defined by blood alone. True family is built on love, loyalty, and respect. And no matter how dark betrayal becomes, truth will always find its way to the light.